Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode. We're kind of on a roll.
Hello.
We have another interview, which I'm super excited about to hear because even for me, this will be meeting this person for the first time and just hearing about their story and their experience as a TCK. So it's going to be really exciting and fun to unpack. But before I do so, I just want to say that we are a podcast that covers a variety of topics from faith, enneagram, being a third culture kid, navigating adulting, and etc. And lots of brain dumps. And before we deep dive into our interview, my name is Yehna Kim.
And I'm Jessie, and this is
Emily May.
Yay!
And welcome to our 7th episode of
At the Table. Woohoo! So Jessie, please introduce us, your friend.
Of course. I've been waiting for this interview. Honestly, as soon as we started episode 1, I knew exactly who I wanted to interview. And she has been the greatest supporter of our podcast. She always comments on our Instagram.
So true.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to have a fan and just a good friend that just is always supporting everyone, just a hype woman,
Yep.
So I'm so excited to introduce my friend Emily. It's rare for me to say that I have a childhood friend that I've known since I was a baby. We've known each other since we were in diapers, and that's
crazy.
Really rare to have. And for us to still maintain a relationship post high school, post grad.
That's crazy.
From college. She's just been a special friend that I've had in my life super closely. I think in the past 2 years, I would say we've been very much connected and in our lives, even though we're apart. So Emily and I have known each other again since our time in Japan. We're both missionary kids. We're in the same mission, which is really nice.
Wow.
But we became closer friends through being in high school together, and obviously being in the same mission. Your parents are meeting together often, and we've had a lot of similar experiences growing up. But Emily's just been that friend that you can always count on, and a friend that you're excited to share your life with, because she's always excited to hear about it and to cheer you on again. So it's been nice having Em visit me. We have another friend visiting us, but it's been nice to kind of explore Chicago, show them
kind
around,
of like two worlds colliding.
So fun.
Yeah, it's like a mini reunion. Would you say, Em?
So fun.
Yeah. So I'm like Chicago so far, so that's a good thing.
I'm a fan.
Good.
Yay!
I'm like, how much should I share about Emily? Because I could talk about it forever. But
yep.
This is Em. I know. Wow, we have a lot to cover, but I'm like, I don't know where to begin. But would you like to share kind of your brief overview of your background, kind of your just where you're from, what your parents are doing, where you grew up, and where'd you go for college? What are you doing now?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi everyone. So kind of like Jessie shared, I was a missionary kid in Japan. I was actually born there, and spent most of my life, just growing up in Japan. We kind of did the 4 years in Japan, 1 year in America. So I bounced back and forth quite a bit growing up. My dad is a pastor. He's a church planner in Japan, so he's still there actually. We had one church that we turned over to a Japanese pastor, and it was really successful and really beautiful to watch the Lord, grow that church up. And then now he's taken over a more struggling church plant that needed some more support. So that's what my parents are doing right now. Cool. I went to a whole bunch of schools growing up. I probably went to like 8 or 9 because I moved so much.
That's more than me.
No, sir.
Yeah, no.
Wow.
I was the guinea pig child.
Oh, yeah, we're the oldest, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, oldest unite.
Yeah, so
and our just family, same pattern. Girl, boy, girl. Yeah, a lot of similarities.
I love
that.
Yenna's
girl, boy, girl too.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Welcome.
Yes, this is great. Yeah, but so I moved around a ton. Well, I moved around a lot and I went to a bunch of different schools, but the most consistency I had was Christian Academy in Japan, which is where Jessie and I ended up going to school together for about 4 or 5 years, maybe. That was really cool. And then I went to Cairn University, which probably nobody has ever heard of, but it's a small Christian college near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And then after that, I became a social worker and I'm working in Philly right now at a women's drop-in center where we serve women who are experiencing homelessness, experiencing substance use disorder, and also a part of the commercial sex industry and or being trafficked. So we kind of just have a safe place for them to come. From just to get away from the streets for a little bit, we offer clothing, we have food in the back, we have like a kitchen where women can just like come in and kind of help themselves to things, which I really love.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really fun. And then we also like offer clothing. They can come out and pick out a whole outfit every day, so it's like 2 shirts, a pair of pants, maybe a jacket, and then we offer like underwear, hygiene kits, and socks every different day of the week. We also give out wound care kits. We give out a lot of things. We offer showers, which is a big service that a lot of homeless people really need, because they don't have access to that.
So true.
Even like the bathroom. Yeah, so it's kind of where I am, what I do. I really love it. It's crazy, it's intense, but it's good.
And that's in Philly,
I bet.
right?
That's in Philadelphia.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Wait, how long have you been doing this?
So I've been there, I actually interned. So it's called the New Day to Stop Trafficking organization under the Salvation Army. And I did my internship in senior year of college. We have a home for survivors of human trafficking as well. So I was working at the home 3 days a week, and then 1 day a week I was at the drop-in center where I am now. And then after I graduated, they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we have a position open at the drop-in. And that was like summer of 2020. So yeah, I've been there for over 2 years now, like almost 2.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. I cannot even imagine the craziness that goes on and just just a reality check that you go through every day. My goodness. Wow. Oh,
I know there's like 2 different chaoses that because so Em and I actually call pretty consistently every week, but because our jobs are so chaotic in different ways, obviously, right? But because of that, like we've been able to call and kind of dump like a little dumping session, like an emotional debrief, because it means a lot that someone else knows what it's like to like live in chaos and constantly have things just like curveballs thrown at you.
Right.
And it's been nice to have Em's perspective as well, because she's dealing with like, women that are coming from different walks of life and like a lot of heavy things. And, I'm dealing with kids and you too, Yehna, but like, either way, like our heart breaks and our heart, our heart breaks for just the sufferings in the world. And it's nice to have someone who gets that and walks beside that every day. So.
Yeah. No, it's been so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my question would be for you, like, especially us growing up in Japan and having a relatively safe environment to grow up in. It's just such a different world. What drew you to do this? Like, this is a complete 180 of what we're seeing, what we would ever see in Japan, right?
Yeah, no, that's honestly so true. Well, okay, so typical MK, I really, really disliked America growing up, and I did not want to move back.
Girl!
Yeah. So, I really, like, in high school and then, like, freshman year of college, I was like, I'm not gonna, like, live in America, when I graduate, like, blah, 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 like, I'm gonna move back overseas. So that was, like, in my head. I really just wanted to go back on the mission field, and so when I went to college, I like came in undecided, but I really was thinking that I was going to be a missions major. And I did try it out like one semester, but then I realized like, okay, one, this isn't marketable. So what the heck am I going to do with this if like I don't end up being a missionary? And then two, like it's not actually giving me practical skills to like learn how to like dive into trauma with people and learn how to love better and actually like help people in their healing process, which is what I want to do and love to do. And so somebody kind of, honestly, it was a whole God thing. I think that the class I wanted wasn't available, and I was trying to sign up for classes, and the only class that I could add into that spot was social work intro. And I was like, all right, Lord, like I'm gonna try this out. And then I just ended up, after that class, I was convinced, like, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. It's gonna give me the skills I need to love people better and like learn how to just dive into that with people. And that is how I kind of got on this role. But I honestly never thought I would stay in America. I still wanted to go overseas, but it was my junior year where I was working. Actually, I was working in a public school as like kind of helping kids in a really impoverished community who had a lot of behavioral issues.
Yes.
I was kind of helping them through just like, it was an after school program, and was just like kind of helping out, but I was just developing relationship with the kids and realizing like how broken life like is here too. Like it's not just, oh, God wants to use me overseas, but like literally 30 minutes from my campus, like there's this much suffering and brokenness.
That's so true.
So I think God really just opened my eyes to like, no, daughter, like I can use you here too. Like I need you here too, you know. Not that he needs us, but you know what I mean. And so I think that then I was like, okay, like I could stay here. There is a need here too.
Wow. So convicting. That's kind of where I'm at in life, just in the tip of it. So that's crazy here that. Oh my goodness. It's so true. I think especially when it comes to children, or not even children, just people even our age that go through things that you like, that's just so unimaginable. And you just kind of back away. First of all, we have the luxury to back away. And then you just think, oh my goodness. I'm almost like so selfish to think that I want to go abroad and do good things. But in reality, it's for us, it's almost a comfort zone because we all three of us lived abroad, and almost it's like, oh, we're just going to be missionaries. But in reality, it's almost comfortable. But us sitting here is actually the training ground, and it's making us have to face things that we didn't even know we needed to face. So convicting things.
That's so true.
Okay, but sorry, I just was
no, I love it. It's so good.
I love how like even in our last week's interview, like John was sharing something and I was like, whoa, oh my gosh,
it's so good.
I love your reactions because like it's genuinely, you're like just purely reacting like back and forth, but I love
that's
it.
really good.
So good.
That's a gist of in her job. But I wanted to kind of bring it back to, well, I can go either way. I wanted to touch on the whole, because we're twos and we're helpers, like we very much feel purposeful in the job that we do. Because even when we share about it, we're like, I'm a special needs teacher. And then Em's like, yes, I work for women that are sex trafficked in my community. So how do you navigate that as a two, feeling so driven, like that, obviously being able to provide, feeling like we're needed for our community, like that's huge for us. How do you navigate like, okay, like I do a job that's very purposeful, but what if I'm not in a setting where I'm not being that helper? Like, how do you navigate that, especially as you are adulting?
Such a good question.
I'm curious because I'm a two too. And I just want to know what her response would be. I'm putting her on the spot.
Yes.
Okay, wow, that's really good. Okay, wait, so you're asking like when I'm not in a role of helping, like how does that change how I view myself, or how do I? Okay.
Because like in a day-to-day basis, you're there, you're with the people, you're helping, and that is like a give and take, right? They need you, but you also need them in a sense, because that's how I feel with my kids. But how do you navigate an environment where you're like, okay, what is my role? Or like, what if I'm not the helper?
Yes.
No, that's such a good question. I definitely struggle without having a set role. Like there's a lot of comfort in like knowing, okay, this is what I'm like here to show up for, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and people know me as this. Like they know they can come to me for this, and like that's where I show up. Yeah, I definitely feel like having a role is a comfort zone for sure. But I think also just because it's my personality is not like super outgoing or like super like I kind of like am a chameleon a lot of the times and I just kind of blend into my surroundings, which I'm trying to work on. But yeah, I think that having a role helps me to like fill that, and then I like know that like I belong. Like I think it comes back to belonging. Like if I don't have a role, I feel like I don't belong somewhere.
Yeah.
And like I kind of like shrink myself because I'm like, oh, I'm not needed here, or I'm not wanted. Which isn't necessarily the most healthy in the world, but we're working on it.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, that word belonging strikes me because I also wanted to ask this question of like, obviously you're a Caucasian in Japan, in an Asian country. Like, obviously you are standing out.
Yeah.
So like clearly you stand out. But then when you're in the States, you blend in. Like you look like any other white girl out there. But inside of you, you've got a lot of Japanese-ness in you. How do you now, like, how has that been for you now that you're kind of building roots in the States? Like, do you feel like a part of your identity is not being lived out? Or like, how was it in Japan for you? And then how is it now as you've made that transition over?
Yeah. Wow. Y'all just keep hitting me with good questions.
I'm curious.
Jessie, I told you, Jessie works for magic.
I love it.
I'm not gonna lie, it's not even on the script over here. I'm like,
no, I know.
I know it's not one of our questions.
She's going. She's just hitting me with them. Oh yeah. Well, I think that belonging is something I've struggled with my whole life. Yeah, it's hard when you I guess for me, like I've always just wanted that so desperately to belong somewhere, but then to be in such different settings where like it's just really not possible, like being a white kid and like even like first grade in Japan, right? Like I was at a public school. There were like 6,000 Japanese kids. I was the only white kid. Like that was a really rough year for me. And I think that I kind of just since then, I'm still figuring that out. Like, how has that affected me? How is not belonging? I know for some people, like it makes them like they grow into that. And for me, I think the opposite happened where I was like make myself smaller or blend in so that I am the same as everybody else, which is also very Japanese culture, right? Like the whole thing, like you hit, like if the nail sticks up, hit it down on the head. Like that is literally what I embodied growing up because I felt like I had to just be like everybody else. And then I remember whenever I would move over to America, I would feel so like misunderstood and people would just like assume so much about me when I was like, no, y'all don't even know.
You don't know where I come from.
Watch out. Watch out, world.
There's a lot about me that is not as it seems. But then I think now on the other side of like, okay, I've left Japan and I'm living in America on my own now. Like this is the first time where like I have chosen where I'm gonna be. Like before it was like I had to be there. So you just, you do what you have to do to like get through it or survive. The first time I chose where I was gonna live and I chose America. And now that I'm kind of so far removed from like my Japanese roots and like people who speak Japanese and like the foods I love, I think that I've started to try to like become more and more like the people around me, which is, kind of been part of my story my whole life.
Yes.
But I'm realizing that I don't feel like I'm living out. There's a big part of me that's missing. Like coming back to hang out with you and Ashley this weekend and all of our other friends from Japan has made me so happy because there's like this whole part of me that like I've almost like buried as an attempt to just like be okay and like survive here in America. But like it's hard. I don't know how to pair those two together, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Right. Like you're still trying to figure it out. Like even it was as simple as like we had ramen just this past dinner. And she was like, oh, guys, this makes me so happy. Like people who want to eat same foods as me and like enjoy Asian culture. And like it was just it was just a meal. And for
Right.
Em, it means a lot because people around her might not,
Yeah.
gravitate towards those
Yeah.
things.
Right.
Just activities they do or things they talk about. And I'm sure you're still figuring that out, right? As you build community where you are and moving to downtown Philly. But
And I wonder, sorry,
Good,
I
go.
wonder, even just thinking, of course, I've just met you and I'm still just grasping. But I just wonder, even when you're back in Philly and those things that come so naturally when you're with the people you grew up with, those questions don't arise, or almost you try not to let it come out because you're thinking it's so different from what they might be used to. So I'm just going to sacrifice what I want so that I can almost make the others comfortable. But in that fogginess, there could be just you almost try to bury the little pieces of you and then it's almost like you forget them. And so when those things arise, you realize, oh my goodness, a whole half of me was just completely forgotten. And I can't even imagine just like kind of the grief that kind of comes up with that excitement as well.
Yeah,
it's weird because it's like you want to be known, but at the same time, and I even said this in my episode a couple episodes ago, but like it's like I crave to be known, but I also want to belong, and in order to belong I have to blend in, is what I keep telling myself. So then I kind of, like you said, Yehna, forget or try to like push aside or bury like a part of me. And it's always finding that balance, right? And I'm sure that's what you're going through, Em, especially because you look like everyone else. Like people aren't going to say, oh, where are you from? Right? Like they're not going to ask those questions to make you feel known as that MK from Japan, right? So I'm sure that barrier is even greater for you. Whereas, I'm in a community that's predominantly white. People are going to ask me, like, where are you from? We don't see a lot of you around here. So I'm sure that's been hard for you and navigating that.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is just I could, like, you always have the option, right? Like when somebody asks you like, oh, where are you from? Or like, what's your story? Like I could quickly be like, oh yeah, like I grew up in Japan. Like I could like easily launch into that. But then I think that right now I'm realizing that I haven't been quick to share that part of my story, because just sharing that I like grew up overseas is almost like a barrier or something that puts me in a separate category as them. And I so desperately want to be the same that like I've like that's been part of the reason why I'm not like leaning into that part of me. But I don't want that to be the reason that I don't, accept part of my story, because literally I was born in Japan. Like literally I spent my whole life there, like until recently, so I think that like that's something that I'm coming to a conclusion of recently, is that like it's okay that it's different, and it's always going to be different, but like there is a lot of beauty in that, and I need to see the beauty in it more than like, oh, this makes me different,
Right. And like everyone's going through that journey, right? Yehna and I a couple years ago were like, oh, we don't want to go through the hassle. So like when people would ask us the Bible study, we'd be like, Yehna would be like, oh, I'm from California. Yeah, I'm from Evanston. Just keep it at that. We're like, we're not gonna pick our battles today. But everyone goes through their own TCK acceptance journey. And it's okay that you're not ready to be like, hey, I'm from Japan. Like that's okay too. And it's on the other side, it's okay to be like, hey, I'm from here. They're going to be like, cool. But I think it's also that like not rejection piece, but like you want them to be curious about it. But if they're not and they just say cool and not ask about it, you're like,
yes,
okay, but don't you want to ask more about it? So it's like, what do you want, Jess?
Pick a side.
No, that's so real. I get that.
So it's been very wishy-washy. But any comments, Yehna, so far?
No, I'm taking it all in. It's so I just relate so much to everything you guys have been sharing. It's so true. I think it's that like you guys, I'm just echoing what you guys say. It's the constant battle between, okay, please accept me, but I also don't want to be a burden, but I also don't want to like lose sight of my identity, but I
Mhm.
also don't ask me because it's too much. And so it's this like crazy mixture of emotions that it's not good, but it's for us, we think it's easier to just push it down and move forward. And I think a lot of, especially MKs, I only say MKs because that's my experience. I can't generalize for everyone, but in general, MKs, even just from my own experience, we kind of want to keep moving on and be essentially better with our work, that we don't want to be dragged by what we think is not important, like our identity, where we came from. Like, why do we need to worry about that? We just need to move on and work and keep going and make our salary. But essentially those little things that we found important, and then we kind of push it aside, we push it down, and the things that we need to process, we think, no, that's just getting in the way of things, eventually comes up, and we kind of feel really lost. And you just wonder, where did this all begin? But we all know where it all began. So it's true.
That's
just
so true.
the crisis that kind of comes with it, or in waves, of course. But yeah. Anyway,
no, for sure.
I've just been
that was a
agreeing.
good summary.
Yeah, no,
You're
it's great.
I agree.
I relate. I'm right there with you.
No, yeah, and not to like add another crisis to the table.
Hey, lay it all down. That's why your podcast called At the
Lay it all
Table.
down. I know. Like, not to add more to this, but like, you are the oldest. You are a pastor's daughter.
Oof,
like, I think it was interesting because last week we got like the TCK perspective of Gian, but we're getting another like MK perspective from M.
Right.
Like being that pastor's daughter, being the oldest, being the guinea pig. Like, how has that been for you? Kind of feeling like, you've got to put up this image, or you've got to have it together, or, oh, my dad must be proud of, I mean, I'm sure your dad is proud of you, obviously, but like, oh, my dad must be proud of me because I am doing this work in Philly. And like, I'm sure you can get really caught up in that. How has that been for you? Kind of navigating that now that you've been out of the house, like on your own, because yehna and I have definitely been on our own separate journeys of try not to react so I can hear. Like, we don't have it figured out together, but somehow we always need to feel like we have it together, and it's because we're the oldest, because we're missionary kids, and it's been kind of this unspoken expectation.
Right.
How has that been for you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting that we all have those similarities. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have felt that people pleasing side of me my whole life. And I definitely think a lot of that comes from like that performance that like, we have to look like we have it all together. And even like maybe this is not exactly what you were thinking, but like for me, I've been reflecting on how church was always like you go to serve and not necessarily like you go to receive, right? And like how I learned that like I have to earn my parents' love by like doing all these things. And then that often translated to, oh, I have to earn God's love by like doing or serving. And when I don't do those things, I'm not as loved, or I'm not as worthy of love.
Good.
And that's something that the Lord has really been revealing to me recently, like, daughter, that's not true. Like, you don't have to earn anything. You can't earn it. You're not worthy of love. It's all what I've done in the cross for you. But I definitely think that growing up, like as an MK specifically, with that, like, service mentality and like having to be the oldest and like all of that, how that's played out is a big part of even how I relate to God. And now I'm still having to like unlearn that so that I can truly understand the love of the Father for me in all of its beauty. But yeah, I don't know.
No, like God is
so
just
good.
saying, like, come as you are.
Yeah.
Like, I don't love you because of what you do. I love you for who you are. And for some reason, like, that's so hard for, I feel like, people like us to grasp. And then therefore for other people to have that view of us.
Right.
Like, how could you love me if I am not being nice to you, or
Right.
not doing something for you, or
Yeah.
not caring for you in a certain way. So I'm sure that's been reflected in your life, like in every stage of your life, right?
No,
As early
absolutely.
as you can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. I resonate with a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to church. I love how you brought that in. It's always on my mind. But especially as your parents are church planting, I can't even imagine just the different communities that you've seen. And then even just for Jessie and I, we've been to several churches growing up because, because our parents speak and all of that. So, but then amongst the churches, unfortunately, we got this like unspoken message that we needed to put a facade of having it all together, and we're almost like the side speaker. There's the parents who does all the speaking, but then at the side they need to ask like, "Ooh, we want need to ask this honest questions, want to get the juice out of the kids," and so then you unknowingly have this wall up wanting to perform because you don't want to show that anything's wrong. And then you go into adulthood having this mentality that church is a place we can't make mistakes. Church is a place we need to be perfect and service minded. But I think it was so crazy and mind blowing post grad when I finally chose a church for myself. And I went to church. I mean, not that I didn't previously, but it was like really my decision, not because I went for friends or anything, just myself. And then the message I heard was there to receive and to be refilled. And then through that, I have a desire and a love to serve. And but it was not. And so I'm just thinking, what? Oh my gosh, my brain. And so I just love hearing how different MKs unpack their view of church and the ways that's impacted them. And because it's so true, because of maybe the hurt they might have felt indirectly or directly, a lot of us leave the church and just see that and after now that I've come to a place where I've reconciled with that, it breaks your heart to see that the body of Christ is the reason people leave, and you're thinking you need to take, and I want to put it upon myself too, that I would represent Christ correctly. And so,
I mean, I feel like you can echo this too, but to give people context of like I don't know, for non-TCKs or MKs who don't know what we're talking about, like we would show up as guests to a church and when they would hand your parents the mic and be like, "Oh, please give us an update of what you're doing." But then oftentimes they would hand it to the kids and be like, "Okay, please share like what you're doing." And so I would get the mic and I'd say, "Well, I'm Jessie, like I go to this school and I'm currently involved in this and that and that. And I also do this at my church." Like usually they give you the spotlight. And obviously when you're in the spotlight, you're not going to be like, "Well, I actually struggle with my faith and I'm not a good child to my parents." And, like, obviously you're going to give the best. You're going to let people know, like, we're worth supporting, like we're worth praying for.
Right.
Not that like they wouldn't if we're not good kids, but you know what I mean? Like we want to sell ourselves. And that's the kind of attention or spotlight, we've had to have growing up. So again, like you said, moving from that to then just going to a church and receiving is such a weird, like you almost feel selfish at first when you're going, like I'm going to see how church can fit with me and what I'm looking for, like that's very interesting.
So
but
true.
I'm glad you brought that up, Yehna, because Em actually has recently committed to a church because she moved to Philly to be closer to her community, closer to her church community. So how has that been for you, Em? Like finally committing to a church, being with the people and like investing in that. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I think, well, it's been really, really sweet and redemptive experience.
Mm.
I think just to have found a church that is so on fire for Jesus and loves the city, and like literally they're like, we're here because we just want everybody to know Jesus, you know, like,
I
and I
love
mean,
that.
yeah, I really love it. But I did notice that as soon as I like moved to the city so that I could be closer, like I'm now an 8-minute walk. And it's a
I
very
love
like
that.
local church. So
Mhm.
like the pastor lives like a 4-minute walk away from me. Like there are
Wow.
people from the church that live like 2 minutes away, like 4 minutes away. Like, you know, they're like everybody's like nearby me, which is so fun. And like we can all like walk to each other's houses and things like that. But I think that I quickly jumped into like all of these leadership roles because I really wanted to, because I like I was feeling so. For context, I guess the past 2 years before that, I had been going to this church that I went to in college, but I didn't really love it, and the people were never really friendly, and I just didn't feel very seen or known there. After
Mm.
like 4 or 5 years of going, like I still knew nobody. I remember one Sunday I went in and like nobody said hi to me, and I was like, wow, this is just so sad. Like I don't understand, you know, like the people of God should be
Oof.
welcoming, and this is just really sad. And so I was church hopping and I found this church in Philly, but I think that for me, like it I had felt like it was kind of a dry season where I wasn't really serving in church up until that point, and I was like feeling I was having almost like a little crisis in myself, like I'm not doing enough. I'm not like, you
Oh
know, I'm
no.
not like
Oh
a part
no.
of the people of God. Like I'm not doing what Jesus would want me to be doing. And so that was part of the reason I moved, because I was almost perceiving this like disappointment that God had towards me, that I was like not like actually living my life the way that I should be.
Oh
And
dear.
so moved to the city, and like the other part of it was like my job is just really intense and really heavy, and it's
Yeah.
also in Philadelphia. So I was like living 30 minutes out of the city, but like commuting in for work and commuting to church, because I was like, okay, my job is so intense and I'm seeing the darkness of Philadelphia like every single day. Like I need something beautiful and something good as well to redeem that for me. And
Right.
so that's why
Mm.
how I found this church and I ended up keeping going to it, because it was just such a breath of fresh air. Like there I was like, oh, God is working in the city. Like God is moving. And I
Mm.
needed to be reminded of that like
So
every
true.
week, because I would always forget. And so a
Mm.
big part of me moving was like, I want to be involved and like, you know, continue to serve, but also like I need this for my own survival. Like so that I'm gonna be okay, I need to be surrounded and like be in
Right.
a missional community where people are just chasing after Jesus. And so yeah, I jumped into all these leadership roles, and then recently I've kind of been struggling with like, what if like I'm not what they thought I was, and like what if I'm not good
Oh
enough?
no, girl,
What
don't
if
go there.
I
Don't
know.
go
What if like
there.
they actually see me and I like make mistakes or I fail or like whatever,
Right.
and then they're like, oh, she wasn't what we thought she was, and like we don't want her anymore,
Oof.
you know? And so like that performance, like I have to earn that love and earn
Mm.
that like spot, or like strive to be seen and known. I think that like started coming back for me, which is really
That's fair. That's okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, because of the MK background though, I really think that's a big part of the reason why I've been struggling with that recently. And
Right.
so I've been trying to like stop and pause and be like, okay, whenever I'm feeling that or thinking that, let me just identify that that is not from Jesus, that is not the way
Mm.
of Jesus. And
So
like
true. Amen.
if anything, my pastor is like, we want authenticity. We like care about people. Like he's not like, you have to do this, this, and this, and if you don't, you're a failure, you know? And so I
Right.
need to just like recognize that, okay, that's coming from me and my baggage that I'm bringing from MK life and like being in this pastor's kid role and ministry for all of my life. And um the church itself is so healthy, and the way that they do leadership is really beautiful. And so I think that for me, it's been honestly really redemptive just to like
Mm.
relearn, like, okay, what does healthy ministry look like? And what does it
Mm-hmm.
look like to do this for Jesus? Not so that people will see me and be like, oh, look how much she's doing, or like so that
Right.
I'll feel secure in myself, but like, no, what is God doing here? And like,
Right.
how can I just like pause and be like, I am loved no matter what, like if I fail in this or not. And then that's where humility comes in. And I'm learning a lot of that as well. So it's
yeah.
been a lot, but it's been really sweet. Sorry, that was a lot, but yeah.
No, no, never a
sharing
lot.
that.
I love that. Amazing. Yeah, I think, man, something I so relate. I'm gonna say relate a million times by the time we end this podcast. But especially in the topic of feeling like a failure and that constant message of you're not forgiven, or you're just not good enough, or you need to do more. And I remember talking about this with, I'm going to expose myself, with my counselor. I promise I'm not crazy, but but I was just walking through it, and she said, okay, if you think that, give me proof, like facts that you are a failure. Who told you? And I sat there going, me.
Yeah.
I thought, and she goes, okay, cool. I'm like, okay, stop. You're making me feel
like
awkward and exposed. And so I just want to say that if there is no proof of or fact that says you are a failure, and we have the best proof and fact say that we are actually loved and accepted. And so, of course, easier said than done, but it's true. I always have to remind myself, and everyone listening too has to remind themselves that it's never what we do or will do that will ever help us reach the standard of success in this world. But it's actually, we are already succeeding in the fact that we are daughters and sons of Christ. And it's almost, even though we wake up not believing that we have to tell ourselves that over and over and over again, just as we tell ourselves that we are worthless or useless or not forgiven. It's almost, we need to counteract that with truth in order that we will finally believe what we say.
Yeah. I know.
Anyway.
I'm like, you are so loved and you are so adored by God. And like, I've really enjoyed kind of listening to your story and how much rawness there is to it. Like, I appreciate your vulnerability because, like, we don't have it together and we're still figuring it out. And it was just so refreshing to hear that you're like, no, I still struggle with performance. Like, I still struggle, and I don't know the answer to where are you from? Like, those are okay things. And I don't know, I just wanted to affirm you in that God sees you and God loves you so much. And
Amen.
I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. But
Yes.
Any last comments to our listeners? Any plugs you want to make for your job?
Please work for us.
Refer us to where you're working. I don't know.
No, I mean, such a blessing. Thank you guys for what you're doing here and this really beautiful, just opening up the conversation for TCKs and making space for these feelings and these thoughts, because obviously there's a lot of stuff that we all have to process.
Keep coming.
I think it's really, really beautiful and honestly like sacred work that you're doing. So thank you for allowing me to join in that. I'm grateful to be a TCK, and I think that that's something I might not have always said, but it's part of my story, and it's part of y'all's story, and it's always going to be. So it's like either we come to terms with it or we're just always going to struggle. So here we are, grateful for the fact that God does not make any mistakes, and there's purpose in everything. And I just think that that's really redemptive to just remember that, like, He works all things together for good, and there's always more that He's going to do in and through us. And I'm just grateful that our stories are just still unraveling. There's so much more to come, and there's so much more room for healing and growth in the name of Jesus. So
for sure.
Amen.
Oh, what a
So
great way to end
good. I
it.
know. I want to go on and on, but that would be crazy. So, but yes, thank you so much for being on here. It's been so good to just listen, and I felt so seen just by hearing your story. So it was really
Yeah.
good. And as much as you said you're blessed, we were blessed times two. Oh my
Okay, that's
goodness.
mutual.
It was a good reset for the week.
Yes, it really
Mm.
was. But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. Please reach out to us with any questions if you'd like to our email, or follow us on our Instagram. Still learning to plug ourselves in. So awkward. And then if you want, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. But yes, please continue to support us and love on us. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys, or talk to you guys next time. Bye.
See you next time. Thank you, guys.